Well, welcome back, everyone, to the VOV Network. It is Saturday, and we're here live streaming once again. I'm Brian, and I'm joined today by my co-host Bridget. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing great. How are you?
I am awesome. I am awesome today. So, listen, we're going to dive into a topic today, and the title of our session for today is "Perfect Does Not Exist." And a lot of people probably look at it and said, perfect. I'm striving to be the most perfect person I can, which is okay. But what we really want to discuss today is talking about some of the challenges and some of the pitfalls of really over processing, overthinking, and over striving to reach or achieve true perfection, or what we're going to look at as perfectionism. Because there are some things that we really need to be cautious and um, focused on so that it can't knock you off your trail or hold you back from accomplishing some of the things that you really want to get into. So stick around. Let's get into it. So, Bridget, how about you share a little bit with the audience of what the background is and why we felt this was a good idea to kind of bring this topic to the table, and just overall what we want them to take away from today's session?
Well, we've been talking about my mental health and the mental and our mental energy, and so we thought we'd just come cross over to what could probably drain that mental energy if you put a lot into it, and that's being trying to be perfect in terms of career, your own health, and body, in terms of your relationships, and what that can drain you of. And so, in essence, for me, perfection means, never being satisfied until it is just right. And so we know that it may not ever be just right. And so we thought that we would bring that to the table, and also have you, listeners, to chime in as well as what perfection looks like to you, and how has that helped you or hindered you in your careers and your relationships, etc.
Mhm. Absolutely. One of our previous sessions, the topic of perfection kind of came up, and we were discussing that, and it was one of those moments where several of us kind of hands went up, like, yeah, I could, relate to a lot of that. Um, so that is part of it. Also, is just self awareness. I think that's the key, and the biggest piece of it is just to make you aware of the potential pitfalls of it, just some of the different behaviors that may be associated with it, so you can help to identify and those types of things. And that's what we're really going to focus in on and kind of bring to the light today. And again, as Bridget was saying, if you're watching, you're online with us today. If you have questions, if you have comments, please share, because that's going to make a huge difference and I think help everybody in our community continue to learn and continue to grow. So we
Absolutely. And
really
I've
appreciate
learned about, I mean, I didn't think I was a perfectionist, but I am a little OCD in terms of household and how I want my house to look. And so I never considered myself as a perfectionist until I kind of looked at, okay, well, you will push that until it's just right. So maybe you have some of
it.
those traits.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. So let's get started. We're going to dive into the presentation here, and we've got some information that we want to share with you. So I'll get that going. Um, we'll start with just giving a kind of a brief definition and overview. What is perfectionism, right? And basic definition there says the action of or process of improving something until it's flawless, or the refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. And you'll note I underlined flawless. And I did that for a reason, because this is the key piece of, I think, the description: flawless. And this is the basic description of that: having no defects or faults, without any mistakes or shortcomings. Right. So then when we really dive that deep into it and say flawless, what is it that we can really think of that really actually meets that standard? Right.
Right.
I mean, in all honesty, what thing can you really think of? Because no defect, no fault, no mistakes, no shortcomings. Um, that's a very, 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 very high standard.
No such thing. No
So
such thing.
Bridget, would you say that that's unattainable or something that we should realistically shoot for? Or what are your thoughts when you talk
Uh,
about?
I definitely think that is something that you should not shoot for, because as long as I've lived, I've never seen anything or anyone of known of anyone that is flawless, having no defects, no faults. Let's just start with the faults, right?
Hmm.
Let's just start there, without any mistakes, and let's underline mistakes or shortcomings.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so you can think of the most caring, passionate, beautiful person walking or playing or a piece of furniture or anything in that nature. You are going to find something. You're going to find a mistake. You're going to find a shortcoming, or even the process. In the process of it becoming perfect, there were
Correct.
flaws and mistakes and shortcomings.
Hmm.
So I don't believe there's not one.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And when I kind of read through the information and got to flawless, and I was like, well, let me drill one level down, and flawless was the word I kind of picked out of it. And I looked at that and I went, yeah, yeah,
Nobody.
that puts it into a whole different perspective of
Right.
when you talk about perfection or being perfect or perfectionism. And if it's to reach that point of where something is truly flawless, um, just unattainable. So, the thing I want to bring up there is the two words and how they contrast each other when we're at this point in the process. And that is, if you're truly, truly just hyper focused on the flawless piece of it and making sure that you get to this place of perfection, you are essentially putting an expectation out there that is achievable, reachable, doable, and all those type things. So in your mind, you're framing that this is the expectation that I want to have or get to. um, but then there's a flip side of that, and especially from a perfectionism standpoint, is the disappointment that's
Hmm.
probably going to come because it's just not attainable to
Right.
be able to do it. So then that's what we're talking about today is, well, how do we manage to better bridge that gap, better control that what where we're setting that expectation,
Right.
and then B, to minimize the impacts that may come from the disappointments that are going to be there. So,
Right.
let's move on to the next slide. And Bridget, you want to kind of cover this and share it
Sure.
for everybody?
Sure. So we're going to talk about some perfectionist traits, and we have already talked about how we identify to these traits, and so we ask that you do the same and chime in and how that has affected you. The first one is: are you pushed toward achieving your goals by the fear of not reaching them? So are you pushed toward the achieving the goals more than you pull toward the goal? And so that is just the drive that you have is no longer the goal.
Hmm.
The drive it now comes from the fear of not achieving the goal,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so we put more work into worrying about not achieving it than we put on actually achieving the goal. And so there is the fear. The drive then is not okay, I need to get this done. Now the goal is, okay, I'm worried about how if I'm going to get this done. So the goal no longer is the point. Number two, Brian.
No, I was just going to say, and you have to think about that from when the fear is what's actually driving it. Is that healthy? Right? Is
Right.
that a
Right.
healthy place to be coming from? And
And
so
so
that's,
you no
yeah,
longer focus on the drive on the goal anymore. Now you
right.
focus on the fear.
Focus on the fear, and that's not necessarily the healthiest place to be coming from, and that's in that situation.
And at the end result, I mean, the end result of that, I mean, when you reach that goal, then how is your mindset? How is your mental health at that point?
Hmm.
If the whole time you were trying to achieve that goal and reach that perfection that you were doing it out of fear. So then
That's
how's your mindset at that point?
Yep, I agree.
The next one we talked about was a perfectionist trait is you only focus on the mistakes and the imperfections. You're judgmental and hard on yourself and others when failure occurs. And
Hmm.
so I my translation of that is you put so much weight on the failure and what didn't work,
Hmm.
that you don't see the progress. And so
Mhm.
what I use it as an example is weight, losing weight, because that is my struggle. And so for me, I would, if I was a perfectionist, I would be devastated if I didn't lose 40 pounds in 3 months, because that's the timeline I set. That's the goal I set. I would be devastated if that didn't happen. But I also would miss the progress. I would miss that, oh, well, now I work out 4 times a week versus 4 times a month that I did last year. And so
Mhm.
I would miss that progress because I'm so focused on, well, yeah, I do work out 3 or 4 times a week, but I did not lose the 40 pounds. And so I miss the progress in that.
Mhm. Yeah, another thing to add in that particular example, what about just the benefits of just overall better health? Because the exercise itself, the routine, has to just be healthier for you. So
Right.
even though you might not be losing the pounds at the rate you want and that kind of thing, you still have to appreciate that you are doing something that overall for your health and for your life is going to be better for you. So celebrate that piece of it too.
Right. And if you want to rate that as a perfected piece of your life, then you can rate that as a perfected piece of your life. I am now eating healthy. I am now working out. And so
Mhm.
I am doing that for my body. So yeah, I didn't lose the weight, but I'm working out now. And now I'm more healthier than I was before.
Absolutely.
Another trait is, do you tend to define yourself or your worth by your accomplishments, by their
Mhm.
accomplishments?
Mhm.
That is a big one. Because when or if you are a perfectionist, you tend to be an overachiever as well. So those achievements sometimes become who you are, right?
Mhm.
So until you're and we've talked about this, very self-aware and learn your strengths, your values, and who you are as a person, you will introduce yourself as your accomplishments.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
and sometimes it's easier to introduce your accomplishments than it is to find out who you really are, to do the work, to find out your strengths and your values and find out who you really are. Sometimes it's just easier to name your accomplishments when you introduce yourself or when you think of yourself.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
easier. That doesn't take as much work as it does to kind of define who you are.
Agreed. I agree. That's a big one. We talk about how you define yourself, and I think the key for me when you talk about this one is your worth, right? If you really condense and bottle what how you feel, what your value, what your worth is, strictly tied to your accomplishments that you have had. Um, that can be a very limiting factor in
Hmm.
your beliefs for yourself and your personal growth and those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Because all again, as we're talking about today, if you have a perfectionist mindset, maybe some you're not achieving or accomplishing the things at the rate or at the pace that you think you should because you're staying focused on it, you're hanging on to it, you're not letting it go because you feel it's not perfect, it's not ready, I can't let it go, I can't take it out of the oven yet, it's still got to cook a little bit longer, right? um, so then your self-worth, if that's what you're saying your self-worth is, but your list of accomplishments is not where you want it to be either, and there's a direct relationship, now you're making your personal self-worth, your view of self from that standpoint, smaller than probably it really needs to be. And again, that's what we talked about before is um, focus on those things along the way that went right. What are the things that you did accomplish as you are working your way through the process? Be tied more to that than the actual finished quote unquote product.
And actually, and you will build your confidence
Hmm.
in the actual thing you're trying to finish.
Yeah,
Because if you're not a self-aware and you don't know your worth and you don't know the values and you're not tying those together, then you feel defeated, which will lessen your confidence in what you're trying to do in the beginning.
absolutely. Absolutely. That is absolutely right. Anything else you want to add before we move on to the next slide, Bridget?
I just like the one about defining yourself and your worth not based on your accomplishments, because and I just want to stress that, because oftentimes, because we're big on I'm really big on education, we're big on entrepreneurship, right now that is the thing. And so people get tied into that, and they
Hmm.
they start to kind of cross the lines of who they are and what they do,
Hmm.
and then who they are become what they do, and that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
And so we start thinking about all our accomplishment, and so we start to get a little. Sometimes we can get a pompous attitude, and then that's our mindset about ourselves, which is far from the truth. Because oftentimes a lot of the big businessmen and entrepreneurs are very insecure, because they hadn't identified their self worth
That's
first.
very true. Right. Right. And that's an excellent point. That is an excellent point. Let's move on to the next slide, and I'll kind of walk us through that. So we're still staying on the traits of a perfectionist, and asking, is this you? Are you only concerned about reaching your goal, um, and you can't enjoy the process of growing and striving? And we kind of touched on that a little bit already, but that's important because some people get so hyper focused on getting to that end point. And it's almost like we talked about before in another episode, Bridget, about you can't. Well, I know it's actually a line from a movie, and it basically says you can't run into running. You actually have to
Have to
walk
walk
first,
first.
and then you can start to run. Right. So focus on that first step, which is taking the first step. And then after a few steps, now you're walking at a comfortable pace. Now you've mastered that. And then you move that to a jog, and then you move that to a run. So
Right.
appreciate that, and start to understand that, and in reaching your goals, that's kind of how you have to strive for those things, and take more time to really appreciate as you do go through um, that growth process, that the striving that it takes to get there are going to be the keys to continue to move you forward. Because as Bridget was talking about just in her challenge a little while ago, if all she saw is I need to lose 40 pounds, and it's not happening fast enough, then there becomes a stress, there becomes this tension. You throw your hands up in the air, and all these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So
You become
it's those
self-defeated.
baby steps that are going to make the difference, right?
I love the run. You can't run into running, and I never really identified that to, starting something. You don't get up and just automatically just start running. You do
Right.
start to walk and trot, and then begin to run. And we often say, focus on the big picture, right? We often
Hmm.
say that focus on the big picture, and we're not really thinking that it's not always that big picture or the destination, right?
Hmm.
But also what the journey looks like to that destination.
Absolutely.
Because I've learned that's where the lessons come in.
Hmm.
That's where the lessons are. That's where we grow.
Hmm.
And so, even if we're focused on that big picture, don't lose sight of the journey or the little small pictures it took to get to that big picture. Excuse me. And if we don't enjoy the process, we'll get to that intended goal. Oh, excuse me. We'll get into that intended goal or whatever that is, and we be tired and
Hmm.
stressed, like I said before, and missing the experience, to notice the growth. And we've been talking about that over and over. Notice the growth that we've achieved.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. I could not. Yeah, it is so true. And just like you said, really are learning to appreciate the growth, the personal growth, and the fact that you are striving to get there is really where you grow and achieve. So appreciate that more. Moving on to the next one. Are you, well, first I'm going to hold my hand up and say yes, guilty as charged. Are you prone to
That's
procrastination?
funny.
Yes, I am. Uh, do you worry so much about doing it perfectly that you fail to do anything at all? So
Hmm.
that's that whole thing where you're sitting there and you're like, all right, I know this is what needs to get done. All right. So then you process to the next step. All right. So this is kind of what I think I needed to look like. Right. And then you go, well, wait, is that really what I want it to look like? Well, maybe it should look more like this. Well, no, you know what? Let me sleep on it. And then maybe I'll feel differently tomorrow about it. And you wake up the next day and you go, oh, I got a whole new idea. You start thinking that through.
Exactly.
And then you go, my first idea was actually better, I think, than the third idea. And so now you're on to day three already, or day four, or month five, or whatever it might be in the process. Uh, guilty as charged. So,
I, that is funny. I did not realize that until I started researching it. I didn't realize that some perfectionists they become so immobilized because they fear that it won't be perfect. So they end up planning it to death, like you just said.
hmm
They
and
plan it to death, or they keep changing it, as you said, or putting it off, as you said. And then, and as you concluded, in some cases, nothing happens,
nothing
or
happens.
they've talked themselves out of it.
Talk themselves out of it, right?
It's
Because
not going to work. All those different ways I tried to twist it and turn it, that didn't seem like that wasn't going to make it happen. So, I mean, let me just do something else. They talked themselves out of it. And I wouldn't have thought that, looking at a perfectionist standpoint, I wouldn't have thought that would be the case because I just don't equate perfectionist to procrastinating.
hmm hmm but it really is. It really,
And
really
that's
is.
what I learned. I thought that procrastinate when you're a perfectionist, you own it. You just own
Right,
it all the time. You just
right.
know exactly where to go, and the next step, and the next step until you're right where you need to be. I did not realize that they do get immobilized by just the fear of it not being perfect.
That's correct.
That is interesting.
So let me add this on top of it. So here's typically how it plays out too. So as I was just giving an example a few minutes ago of, oh, maybe idea is better than idea three is better than idea two, and which is just procrastination. Let's just pick one, move forward, right?
Right.
Um, and really, how it actually plays out, Bridget, when you talk about, it's not so much that they give up on it, that nothing happens. It's that another idea on something else comes along, and then they gravitate toward that because, oh, now this is more important to me than what I thought I had. So they just put it down, right? And then they start going through the same process with this new thing that they've latched onto. Oh, but
Right.
then that's not good enough. So then, yeah, but then maybe I should do. Well, I should ask so and so.
Yeah.
Who's
Planning to death.
thinks about this, right? And then guess what? A new idea, concept, whatever thought comes in, and they put that one down and they move to that, right? So it's this ever-ending circle
Circle.
of
Planning it to death.
planning
Where
it to
no
death.
longer is the beginning of the first thing. It's like the beginning of like the fifth thing, and
Correct.
it has nothing to do with the first thing. And now you're just way down there, so you're like, okay, well, maybe we just work on that.
Yeah.
So Lasadrian, hi Lasadrian. Lasadrian said, I'm a procrastinating perfectionist. You got it down to a science. Is that what you're saying? You have that down to a science. How is that working for you? How is
Right.
that?
Yeah.
How is that working for you? Are you going to be able to let us know now? Or are you going to let us know tomorrow? How is that working for you?
Yeah. That's 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 a
That's
challenge.
interesting.
Yeah, that's doubling down basically, right? I mean, you're
Yeah.
fighting with both those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that is why we wanted to bring this in and just share what we were talking about here, because this is a big one. This one is a very, very big one. And she actually says it doesn't work at all.
No, you end up starting. Then, yeah, you might want to change to one of those.
Yeah. Well, the
To
good
one of
the good
those.
news is we're going to be talking in a few minutes here about some ways to try to get some of this under control, because that obviously is one of the key components uh, of what we want to share today. But again, I do want to go back to this because I myself can be guilty of the procrastination piece, and again, as she's saying, it being tied to also a perfectionist piece, and yeah, it can be a vicious cycle that you find yourself in, and it really is, it simply boils down to taking action. That's
Mm-hmm.
really what it comes down to. You just have to do, right, and that's the thing is we are doing. And I made a reference to a Denzel Washington quote, and I think one of our previous things about movement doesn't necessarily equal progress.
Progress. Yes.
So it's just that whole thing about, you can run in place, right? It's like being on a treadmill, right?
Yes. You're moving, but you're
You're
not
moving,
going anywhere.
but you're not really going anywhere, right? So same thing with this perfectionism piece or the procrastination piece. How are you actually moving forward in some way? Because that is actually what you should be trying to do. That's the goal. That's the objective.
Right. And I likened it to when we talked about this before, being a busy mess instead of busyness.
Busyness, yes,
Yeah, be a busy mess because
yes.
you're just in circles. And I was just thinking about something when LaSaja said when she said she was a procrastinist perfectionist. In some way, you really have to know yourself to be able to identify that.
Hmm.
So in some way, you do have to have some self awareness to be able to be able to identify. Oh, okay, well, yeah, maybe I am a perfectionist because,
Hmm.
like I said, with the OCD, I didn't really realize that could be a one of those traits.
Hmm.
You want something to look just right, and I never thought. I just thought I just wanted it that way, but that is one of the traits of being a perfectionist. So
It
you do
is.
have to have some level of self awareness to be able to say, yeah, I think that is me. So
Yes, you
you're
do.
onto something, LaShadra. You're onto
Yeah.
something.
Yes. So we're going to transition now, and we'll get into talking about some ways to overcome being a perfectionist or perfectionism in general. So we'll share that and go from there.
Okay. So tips for overcoming perfectionism. Um, we're gonna start with practice mindfulness, and but I want to first say that the key word is practice, right?
Mm.
Because isn't it ironic that we say practice makes perfect?
That's a good point. I never thought of that.
We say practice makes
Practice makes
perfect.
perfect. Yeah, we say that all the time. That's true.
But no, practice makes it possible. Practice, I am
I
here to
like
tell
that.
you that practice does not make it perfect. But I
That's
thought that was very ironic that we say that. But no, practice makes it possible.
okay.
Practice makes it possible. So in practicing mindfulness, we should adopt and we've been talking about this the whole time, adopt a growth mindset, right? And what growth is taking place, right then, presently, you know,
Mhm.
and that kind of takes away the pressure from what's going to happen in the future with this
Mhm.
goal or with this plan, and it also gives us some hope and improves how we grew from the past.
Yep.
So if we practice, and I know you're going to speak on this on the mindfulness piece, if we practice a mindset of growth, then we can learn how to just focus on what we're doing right now and how that is progressing and how we progress from the past and how that's going to flow smoothly into the future.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, very much so.
You have anything you want to say about mindfulness?
I do. Mindfulness. So I think the thing there is, what is it? Right. I mean, we hear the term, and I think it's one of those terms kind of like, well, okay, what does mindfulness mean? Right. So it really is. It goes back to awareness for
Mm-hmm.
self.
Mm-hmm.
That's one piece of it. Uh, it also is where you focus, and we've talked several times before about what parts or what things do you focus on. What is front of mind, right? And what you're actually changing here, and we don't want to get into the whole psychology of the mind necessarily today, but it's that conscious versus subconscious
Right.
mind space as well, right? So, what are you mindful of? What are you paying attention to? And sometimes we don't realize the things that we're actually paying attention to are driven by our subconscious more than our conscious mind, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but this is where we have to work to start to change and groom and grow ourselves so that the thing, because it's just like anything, you create a habit. The more you do it, and I love it, Bridget. I'm not going to say practice makes perfect. It makes it possible. Um, we need to start to take our minds and think, what do I focus on? What are the important things for me to start to overcome perfectionism or procrastination or whatever else it might be, and consciously be aware of and focus on those things. And then over time, what actually happens is that process moves from the conscious mind to the subconscious mind.
Right.
And then now you start to be mindful of those things without even having to actually focus or think about it. You're just kind of wired in that way. So that's really what I wanted to bring up when I say, what is mindfulness? Is it is a way to start to essentially rewire your thought process so then
Mm-hmm.
these things automatically happen and you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to so much consciously focus on it as it's just a subconscious. It's almost muscle memory. You just remember what to do. It's like you get out of the bed in the morning, you throw your feet on the floor, and you stand up and you walk.
Yeah.
Do you think
You don't
about
have to
that?
think about any of those things.
Right. It just
It's
happens, right?
automatic.
It just automatically happens. So that's what mindfulness is really about, and why we wanted to really highlight that as part of this process.
Right, and you can use that onto the second point. um, Practice stopping the negative self-talk and comparing yourselves to others. And we'll talk, and I'm sure Brian will speak on the negative self-talk. But instead of criticizing yourself, use some self-compassion. We use it with other people, when they're down, and when they didn't do as well as they thought they would do, or when our children doesn't do what they tried but they failed. Use some self-compassion, and that motivates us to do better or to stay focused. So when we criticize ourselves, we tend to demotivate ourselves, and that makes it for a more stressful
Hmm.
plan. We're more stressful in the goal, and we tend to get hopeless now that we can even achieve it. So
Hmm.
practice that self compassion. And we talked about, this is a thing, comparing ourselves to others. Because of social media and how broad it is and how many platforms it is, it gives you plenty of opportunities to compare your life to others. And even if you don't get on social media, you can cut your TV on and all the reality shows, and there you are. You're not living your best life because you're not living it the way they're living their best life. And really, comparing ourselves to others really just works to validate our fears and our self doubt.
Hmm.
That's all it does. It validates our fears and our self doubt. It does not motivate us at all.
Hmm.
I've never been motivated. Well, I've been motivated by the success of people and what they've done, knowing that I can do it too. But if I compare my life to theirs, it never motivated me to do better. It kind of validated what I feared or what I doubted about myself.
Hmm.
And if you
Hmm.
really think about that, and if you're really self-aware, and those comparisons really unfair, because we don't really have all the facts about someone else's life.
You are so correct, because we are strictly on the outside looking in,
Looking
right?
in, and so we don't have the facts. I mean,
No.
so really comparing ourselves to others is unfair to us, because we don't really have the facts about someone else's life. And I've learned that over the years, just by, and I think we talked about this in another session, just by seeing someone on the outside, and even people that have seen and talked to me, they would say, I would never would have known that. You
Hmm.
know, I would say, I never would have known that. Just looking at everything that you do, I never would have known you were going through that. Or I never knew that you had to struggle. I mean, you come in on the story, on the part of the story that you come in on.
Hmm. Hmm.
And a lot of times it's not the beginning, right? So you only came in on that part of the story. So it's
Yeah.
not really fair.
Could not agree more. I want to jump in on some of that too, because I think one of the things that we are, and this goes back to us as children, and how we are kind of raised from a societal standpoint, and that is that we're taught to be competitive. It's good to be competitive, right? And I'm not saying being competitive is a bad thing, 'cause that's not the case. But you still, that's another one of those things that I think we overlook as we mature and go through life. That's something else that you need to be aware of and to manage,
Hmm.
because when you're looking on social media or this or that, and because that's where that motivation is really coming from, is you feel
Right.
like you got this, what is it, keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Right.
Right. And that's straight bottom line competition, right?
Hmm.
And that's what that is. Um, but this is where we talk about, you got to be able to shift your mindset, and not be focused on, keeping up with the neighbor next door, or the person you see on social media, or whatever else it's going to be. Because what should be driving you is your personal values. What's your purpose in life? What are you focused on? What are you trying to achieve? And let that be the motivators, and the things that truly drive you. Because if, let's say, you are keeping up with Bob Jones next door, and he gets this or gets that, and you
Hmm.
figure out a way to get the same thing. But if that's not truly where your value, what your heart, what it is you want in your life, you're still not going to be satisfied. It's
Right.
not going to be fulfilling to you,
Right.
right? And so there's still going to be a void that's going to be there. So a huge key component that we need to do is really start to look inward. It's in here, not outward. And look, and let's find those things that resonate with you, within your soul, within your spirit, within your mind and heart, and make that what your action is about, and not what you see out in the world. So,
Right, because as you and you'll find if you do the latter, if you compare yourself to others, you'll find that you really did not want to do that or be that person. It just looked like that was the happy ending for you. And you'll
mhm,
find that if you really become self-aware and look inward, you find that I really am not like that anyway. I really didn't want to do that, but it's just
mhm,
like it was making them happy. So I felt like I want to be happy too. So let me do that. Let me do
mhm,
what they're doing.
mhm.
So let's talk about self-talk, negative self-talk.
Yeah. So self-talk too. I want to get into that real quick. Self-talk. You know, you hear that and you go, okay, well, I know in general exactly what that means. So most people assume that they do, because that's, don't talk, down on yourself, or et cetera, et cetera. you know i I'm not smart enough, or I'm not tall enough, or I'm not fast enough, those types of things. So yeah, that is definitely negative self-talk, but it can also present itself in many other ways that I think people don't realize. Bridget, what was that example you gave when we were talking a little bit earlier, when you were talking about
And of course, I was talking about weight, and I was saying, if I didn't lose the weight, if my goal was to lose 3 or 4 pounds that week, and then I talk myself out of it because I start to say, well, you like sweets, and so what are you going to do at 3 o'clock when you want that chocolate, and you don't want to cook, and so I start to give myself these um, negative points about how it's not going to happen,
hmm hmm hmm
rather versus what I can do to make sure it happens. And so I've
absolutely.
already kind of discounted the fact that I'm going to lose the weight because I've already talked myself into all these. Okay, you're gonna eat that chocolate, and you know how you like this, and so I'm already defeated because I've
Correct.
already given myself these defeated statements and self talk.
Correct. Another thing to bear in mind is just the good old fashioned English language when it comes to negative and positive framing of
You can't
anything.
say
I, I mean, it really is, right? Because when you put a post-it up that says, don't do this, right? Well, the don't in itself is what? A negative statement, right? So how about I'm going to do
to do
that?
it. Yeah,
Right? Versus don't do this, right? So even something as simple as reframing how you write it down, that feeds into your mind in a different way. Because saying, don't eat those chips versus saying, I'm going to eat healthier, is two totally different statements, right?
right,
They actually psychologically have a different impact on you and on your brain. So it's interesting psychology behind it, but just how you use your words also matters in these situations. So that's what we mean by reframing your self-talk from a negative versus positive standpoint. And I love Bridget's example about you start throwing obstacles in the way of what your actual goal or objective is. Because it's like, I like my midnight snacks. I'm not going to give up my popcorn, blah, blah, blah. So as you start to go through these things that which are undermining what the
right.
actual goal is to begin with, right?
But I can also say, I do like to eat my snack at 12. Maybe I'll eat a healthier snack at 12, and I can
Mhm.
still have my snack because we all know, even as a child, the more you say I shouldn't do it, the more I want to do it.
Correct. Correct.
So let's put something else in place of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's as psychology, as you said, as a child, the first thing that when somebody tells you no, what do? You rebel, right?
Hmm.
So frame what you do, frame the talk with yourself in a positive, moving it forward light, not, slapping yourself on the
Yeah.
hand, because what are you going to do?
Hmm.
You're going to rebel. Even if it's against yourself, you're still going to rebel if
Yeah.
if
Right.
you frame it in
Right.
that way.
Right.
So let's move forward. Uh, go ahead. We'll go on to the next one here, and this is talking about, you know, setting achievable goals for yourself, and then focusing on the progress. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but this one's a huge one for me because, and I use that analogy 1,000 times about, how do you eat an elephant? Um, One bite at a time, right? I mean, you can't consume the whole thing at one time. But then let's talk about achievable. And I think that is where I think we go wrong most times in goal setting
Yeah.
is we set something, and again, if it's driven by perfectionism, oh boy, have we might have set a goal that truly is not achievable because we've set it at a place and at a point and in a way that's so high.
Hmm.
How can you actually get there, right? And we're not saying that you shouldn't strive towards these things, because you should, but you need to make sure that you're using two words. Is it truly attainable? And then, can I achieve it? And that's different. Attaining, it means you're there. When you have to think about it from that standpoint. Achieving is those, in my mind, those are the steps you take to get there,
Steps. Yes.
right? So that's what we want to focus in on right now, is talking about the achievable piece of your goal. And then from that, then you focus on the progress. So in other
Right.
words, you have to take that big goal and say, this is where I want to, this is what I want to attain. All right. But this is where I am. And so you got a gap, and you can't jump from here to here. Right. So what do these pieces in between need to look like? And as you focus on that, take step one, take step two, work your way through it, right? That's what's going to be the most important, I think. Bridget, what do you want to chime in on that?
And what I've said over and over again, I guess I'm really a stickler for this, and I'm just very adamant about enjoying the view,
Hmm.
the progress.
Hmm.
I've never been an overachiever. I would tend to think I was an underachiever just because I didn't want the stress of trying to achieve more.
Hmm.
That's just how my life was built up.
Hmm.
So I would set small goals, and as I accomplished those goals, then I would set more small goals. So I took them a bite at a time. So it was achievable, but I knew that I could achieve some of them at the beginning.
Hmm.
So I didn't really set before, in my younger years, I didn't set goals that I had to work too hard for. Now it's totally different. Now I'm setting those higher goals that are still achievable, but I'm still really strict on. And for myself is enjoying the view, enjoying the progress, and making note of the lessons and what worked for me and what did not work for me. And that's how you can really move forward to the next step, is with
Hmm.
that information.
I
What is
agree.
working, what is not working.
Yep, I agree. I agree. And then the last piece I want to get back on, and this is what I am trying to do to move myself out of my perfectionism slash procrastination piece, and that I have to deal with. And that is, understand when good enough is good enough. And that is the thing that you really have to try to start to get comfortable with. Because, when you're trying to achieve a certain goal, because what can tend to happen is, maybe you reach it. You set a goal, boom, boom, boom. You get there and you go, yeah, but that's not good enough. So you raise the bar, right?
Some
And then
more.
instead of celebrating and appreciating that you did achieve that goal, now you push it further. So it's part making it more stressful because now you've raised the target, but then
Hmm.
also you are procrastinating because if it was something you were working on that you wanted to release to the world, or whatever, however it might be, but now you're holding it back because it's not good enough. In your mind, you're telling yourself it's still not good
It
enough.
still could be better. And I guess that's a hard call for a perfectionist, because in one you've achieved that goal, but because you're a perfectionist, it could be better at that
Hmm.
point. So
Hmm.
I'm sure that's a struggle,
It is.
as a perfectionist, to say, okay, that's where I set it at. That's where I set it, and so we're here. So that's enough. Let's move on
Hmm.
to the next thing.
Yep.
Instead of, well, I think it could be a little bit better than that.
Give you a
And that
simple
has to be
example.
difficult.
I'll give you a simple example. And this, everybody in our world today deals with this because it's the world we live in. Do you find yourself proofreading 10 times a simple email response to somebody, or maybe even a text message, because you're like, man, that's not really what I want to say. But wait, yeah, that word is, I can think of a better word, right?
I will even read it after I've sent it, just to make sure I sent it and said exactly what I wanted to say. So I can later, if I didn't, I can say, okay, I meant to say, yeah, I do that. I will say, yes, I do that.
Yes. That is actually a perfectionism trait, because you know what your thought was, you laid it out, you typed it, and then you go, let me reframe it. Let me reframe it. It's like, you know what? Let me go to lunch. I'll come back. When I come back from lunch, I'll look at this email again, and then maybe I'll send it then. I mean, right? That's that's what's behind that whole process.
Because my personality is so spontaneous and so right then, which I'm working on, I'd hardly ever procrastinate because I just want it to happen.
Right.
I just want to do it. I just want to get it done. Let's just do it. And then we'll go back and look at it if it didn't work.
Hmm.
So I want to see how it's gonna. I want to see how it's gonna turn out. I want to see what the steps are gonna be and how that's gonna look and how that's gonna feel. I want to see the progress. And so I've had to do some things over again just because I'm not one to procrastinate on plans and visions and purpose. I'm just going to work it out, and then we'll just see. Let the chips fall where they may, kind of. We'll just see what we need to do. We have to go back and do something different. We'll go back and do something different.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good that you have the ability to revisit and tweak it as it goes along, but it's already essentially out in the world for the most
Yeah,
part.
it's already out there, though.
It's out
Yeah,
out there. So,
that's a transparent part of me.
but that's the key, and that's the part for the perfectionist, is when is good enough
Good enough,
to
right?
to to actually
Right,
let it go and put
right,
it down and move forward, right?
right.
So that's the part right there for a true perfectionist, is to, okay, it's good enough. I'll just put it down and I'll move on to the next thing, right? And putting it down mean release it, publish it, send it, whatever it might be, that it is ready for the world to see. And it's interesting because so much of their and we don't want to get too deeply into this. This is a session we might revisit later when we're talking about self-esteem, is also tied to that, because
Right.
it's out in the world now, right? So
Hmm.
the world can see whatever this thing is. So then the question becomes, my image, my
How are
self-esteem,
they gonna think? How are they gonna think? What are they thinking about it now? And put it out there, and it's not quite how I wanted it. So now, do they know it's not quite how I wanted it?
right?
Or
Right?
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So all of that's what's going through the brain. So again, these are the habits that we need to start to try to rein in,
Hmm.
because, as we said, the most important piece is what Bridget just shared a minute ago, is uh, getting it out there, doing it, actually taking the action is the key part of it, right? And that's the best way to get past it. And if you need to tweak it later, so be it. But getting it out there, I think, is the
Right.
key
And
part.
nobody knew it wasn't right but you.
Well,
Just
that's true. That's true. That is true. So let's move on to the next bullet point here. Pay close attention to any thoughts that contain words like such as must, should, always, have to. Um, and what that's doing for you is that's where you are setting your mind, and setting your mindset in a way that um, what's driving it is the wrong thought process. You're
hmm.
sitting there, you're going, I must do this, I should do this, always have to do that, right? Um, because you're being driven by the wrong motivators in that situation. And so there's different word choices, different ways we should probably frame things
Hmm.
in our thoughts, in our minds, so that it's coming from a different place. What do you think about that, Bridget?
Those must, should, always, and have to words, they are pressure words, basically.
Hmm.
They apply pressure, and it's sometimes that's not really a good thing. So when those words set out this negative vibe, challenge those negative thoughts. We often get stuck in this all or nothing thinking. In reality, there's a lot of space between must and might. or always and sometimes.
Mhm.
There's a lot of space between that. So pay close attention to those rigid thoughts. And like you said, change the vocabulary because must means there is no other way. I must
Mhm.
do it this way. There is no
Mhm.
other way. Or I
Mhm.
should do it because who else is going to do it?
Mhm.
Or we should do it this way because there is no other way to do it. And I always do it this way because that's always the way it's supposed to be done, which is what we know is not correct. I mean, I have to do it, and that's not correct as well. You don't have to do it. You don't have to
Right.
do it by yourself. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it this way. It's always another way. It's always someone else that's going to be there to help to do those things. So those are really pressure words.
They are. They're very much pressure words. And like you said, just by reframing it in a way that kind of the whole point is to move it forward, right? And
Right.
then move it forward in a productive fashion and not that you feel pressure or that there is this unrealistic standard that you're trying to get to.
Right.
Because there will never be flawless, as which is what we talked about at the
At
very beginning
all.
of this session,
At all.
right?
At all.
That's the key component. And then we're here at the last one for today, and that is celebrate every success. And Bridget, I'm gonna let you talk about that because I know you likes to celebrate.
I like a good party. So, and then celebrate to me, that whole word just sets off signals inside of me, just positive. I feel like they're set off fireworks inside of me. Just celebrate everything. I'm like that. And most people that know me know that I'm like that. And that's
Mhm.
basically what I've been saying through the whole show is celebrate the win, celebrate the progress, celebrate that you came up with the plan. Um, Celebrate the plan. And so it's not hard to find something to celebrate. Life is a constant modification.
Every day.
It's a constant modification, right? So even if you manage to to get to a place or to where everything is meeting or lined up perfectly. If you get to a place where everything is just going so perfect, your life is perfect. And that's a big if, right? It is guaranteed that that is short lived. That is short lived. So enjoy the wins, celebrate the wins, and
Mhm.
and I want to ask, stop putting so much pressure on the perfect time and the perfect salary and the perfect person, the perfect plan. All we really have is right now.
Mhm.
All
Mhm.
we really have is right now. So if you have to put a perfect time on something, let right now be the perfect time.
Mhm. Mhm.
If you
That's all
have
you
to
got.
be perfect about that. And so let right now be the perfect time. And so celebrate those things. It's not hard to find something to celebrate, even in the longevity of it and and it's taken so long to reach this. And I should have been here by now. Celebrate the part that you are still in the game. You are still planning. You are still here to see it come. At this point, you're still here to keep
Mhm.
going. So even in that, we can always find something to celebrate.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I like to use a sports analogy when you talk about celebrating, and any sport doesn't matter at a professional level. Every year there's a champion, right?
Hmm.
But there are players who might play 15 years and never actually be on a championship team, but they'd still love and appreciate the game that they've played all of those years, and they celebrate and they rejoice in the
Hmm.
fact that they got the opportunity to play that game for because it fed a little boy in them, a little girl in them, whatever sport that they're playing, and they loved it, right? Because they can't always be a champion, right? There's only one, right? So, and you might not ever be in that place where you actually become the champion. And that's not to say not we're not saying don't strive for it because obviously every last one of them, that's what they want is that ring
Hmm.
on their finger as a champion. But again, the flip side is still appreciate the fact that you got that opportunity step by
Good.
step, day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute to be in it,
The
in
game.
the game.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Even with fans, if we're talking about a sports analogy, even with fans, I've heard people say, "Well, that's not my team. I just love the game.
Right.
I just love to see a good
Yeah,
game.
exactly.
That's I don't really care who wins. I just love to see the game.
Right.
And so they just celebrate the sport of whatever it is, football, basketball, or whatever it may be. And
Hmm.
so they celebrate the game. They just love it. So like you said, celebrate that you're still in the game. Or you
That's
just
good.
even if you just got in the game, that you know what the game is,
Right.
that you want to get into. And so
Yep.
a lot of times we look back on where we are in life right now, and even as and I know it has to be, and I'm not a perfectionist, so that I know of. So I know it has to be a struggle. That if, as a perfectionist, we look at okay where I am now versus where I think I should be, instead of looking at where I am now versus where I was.
Mm,
And
that's a
we
good one.
need to consider that. We
Yeah.
need to consider that when we're looking at our life and especially when we're comparing our lives to others or comparing our lives to our own life
Hmm.
and where we feel like we should be. And we wanted everything to be perfect, but it was not. But that's by our standard. Because just like we're looking at someone else and seeing their perfect life, someone else is looking at our life
Mm.
and thinking
Yeah.
it's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have to celebrate where we are because as someone is looking at our lives and thinking, oh, wow, I
Yeah.
wish I had XYZ. I wish I can do XYZ. So in
Hmm.
essence, it is kind of perfect because it was perfect for us
Yep.
and where we are at this point in our lives. So really
Yeah.
consider that when you think about your life and how you're comparing it, or even how where you think you should be based on where you said you were going to be on that paper or in that planner or in your dreams or however you laid it out. You're still here, so you're better than it was back then. It
Yep.
might not be as far as has have moved as far as you wanted to go, but you're still here to do it.
Yep. Yep. So I agree. Celebrate those successes. Even if it's the first day you write the concept of what you want to do and you don't even have a plan. Celebrate that because you're moving forward in some shape, form, or fashion. So
Because I've heard a lot of people say, "Well, I have a plan, but I really don't know," and they say I need to do no, just start,
just
just start right there, just
yeah,
start right there.
yeah, that's it. Absolutely. Well, Bridget, let's bring this home. This is our question of the day. How is perfectionism impacting your daily life? Bridget, you want to go first?
Um, I would say it's not perfect, impacting my day life just because I don't set those standards high. Now, I will say that in those small ways that I acknowledged before, in terms of wanting my house to look a certain way, now, or being transparent, or looking a certain way. I'm gonna just bring this out here, or looking a certain way when I leave the house for a certain event. I have changed clothes so many times um, that, and when I got to the place, I was like, "Oh, I could have wore tennis shoes. Everybody got on tennis shoes." So it does impact. I guess it does impact my day in some instances, wanting to look the perfect, for that type of event, or wanting my house to look so perfect and that I'm running late somewhere because if I saw some dust on there, I had to now stop everything I was doing to get ready to leave out the door to dust off the top of the TV. I guess it does impact some part of my life. I just changed right then, y'all. I'm sorry. Um, I just changed right quick. So it does impact my day. It makes me late. For things that, and if I could have just taken care of that at another time. What about you?
So for me, and as I said when we got into the yeah, it's part of my challenge every day. Accepting when good enough is good enough is probably the biggest one for me, because I it's like editing or this or that or the other thing, and it's like hours later, and it's like, oh, still not satisfied. Oh, that still needs to move here. Nope, put this paragraph before that paragraph. Whatever it is, right?
And then it's the next day.
Right. Yeah, and then it's the next day or 3 a.m. or however that plays out. So that is my personal greatest challenge from a being transparent standpoint is just accepting to say, you know what, just put it out, let it go, and if we need to tweak it later, you can do that. Um, and what, and again, being transparent about it, what's driving that is, um, as Bridget was saying, about the dressing to go to a certain place. For me, it's um, how is it going to be perceived once it is out there, right? Um, and that I think that's the key. Is it's just as I was saying earlier, we write an email, and you restructuring the words, changing this word, and doing that, and doing this. But that's actually the beauty of the English language, and just accepting that 10 people could respond to the same email, and
A
all
different
10
way.
responses are going to be
Yes.
completely different, right?
Yes.
So there
Yes.
is not a perfect way to do it, right? So why are you sitting here going, no, that take this paragraph, I move this word, add this word, put this sentence before that sentence? It doesn't matter, right? Because your way is gonna most likely be
Right.
different.
Be different than mine. And the
Yeah.
Sadrian responded. I can't see all of it. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. You want to read it? Okay, so for me, she said, "Thank you so much, Lashadra, for chiming in. For me, it slows me down. I critique everything I do, but thanks to you too, I'm going to work on that. And that was our purpose today. As I said before, it does slow me down as well. And as Bryan shared, yes, you are always late. Um, and now I know why. As Bryan has said, it causes him to procrastinate. So definitely we can understand where you're coming from in there.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. I will say that just to add, it has to be a hard job to be a perfectionist. It has to be hard because you value, well, you want it to be that goal or that item or that plan. You want it to be so perfect that you sometimes damage your your idea of what perfect is, or even presenting what you have to the world. You sometimes, delay that based
Hmm.
on what you think should happen.
Hmm.
And that's to me, that would be the most unfortunate one, is delaying what you have to give to the world based on how you think it's supposed to look.
I agree. And so that is the struggle, and to just say, enough is enough, and let it go, and
Right,
and move
right,
on to the next thing,
right.
and appreciate, as you have stated over and over, the journey, and the fact that you were in the game, you pushing it forward, you move forward, and that you even just had the courage to do it in the first place, you know, and
Definitely. Definitely. Just
just
like when
that.
you're on a trip, and sorry to interrupt, when you're on a trip, when you go on a trip, and really kids, they ask, are we there yet? Are we there? Like, it's taking a long time to get there. Why is it taking us so long? But if you're in the car with your children and you're playing games and you're pointing out different artifacts and different landmarks, you get there so fast.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep.
And you're like, oh, wow, we're already here. That was fast. And so I liken it to that. You get there so much faster.
You do.
You're not
And
as tired.
yeah, and the last piece I just want to add on that is, as you did mention, that's where the growth and the learning actually happens. Because if you are tunnel vision just on the end result, you miss so much of the things that you may learn along the way, the
Hmm.
personal growth for yourself along the way. It you it's it you just miss out on so much, and
So,
that's where the true transformation and growth actually happens, is the experience of
hmm,
the actual journey itself.
hmm, hmm,
Be
absolutely,
present, as Bridget said, be present. Try to stay as much as you can in the moment, not losing sight of where you're trying to get to, but just appreciate that step by step, hour by hour, minute by minute journey of what the whole process is all about.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Final thoughts? Anything else you want to add before we wrap up for today?
This has been great. This has been great, and I'm gonna, in anybody out there, let's say as well, share this. This may be something that we need to revisit at another time, especially toward the end of the year when we talk about goals met or unmet. And what headspace were we in, and were we trying to set those were we setting those unachievable goals, or unattainable goals. So I think this was great. This
Yep.
was great to go into the third quarter of the year soon.
Yep. I agree. I want to go back real quick. I'm going to bring this back in, and I just want to go back to flawless. And for me, this is the end result of everything for me with everything we've discussed is if you're going to set a top filter to however you filter what's happening in your life, things you want to do, goals that you're setting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you want to filter it through something that starts at the very top. Take this definition of flawless and use it from the standpoint of whatever that thing is that you're trying to do. It's not gonna these things. It's just not possible, right?
It's not.
So it will have defects. It will have faults. Uh, will you make mistakes along the way? Will there be some shortcomings? Answers yes and yes, right? And that's the key is all of that is okay. Just do it, as our friends with the swoosh say, right? Just do it, right?
And even if you're not, if we're not speaking about goals, and we're just talking about other areas of your life, it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be flawless, and it's not going to be. There are going to be some mistakes along the way, and it may not be a perfect time to take that trip. It may not ever be a perfect time to take that trip.
Mhm.
But you have the opportunity to make it a perfect time. You can make that time perfect. It may not be the perfect income. It may not be the perfect salary, but you have the ability to make the salary perfect for you. It may not, and I'm just going to go as far as it may not be the perfect person. She may not be everything that you wrote to God that you wanted in a mate. They may not check off all those things, but look at those parts that they check off, and you can make that into the perfect relationship. So it's never going to be the perfect time.
Yep.
If you're looking for a perfect time, I'm telling you it's not going to happen. So let now be that time.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, Bridget, this was great. Thank you for taking the time today. For those of you who joined us live, we appreciate you and definitely appreciate the comments and your feedback. If you do watch this on the playback, continue to add comments because it still gets shared within the community. So we greatly appreciate that as well. And we will see you in a few weeks. We're going to be doing a new session, and we're going to be essentially moving on to kind of another topic that's going to be kind of a series that we're going to get into, and we'll give you the details on that.
We're really excited about that.
That's going to be a big one for us. That's going to carry us through June, July, and August. So it's a very large series and of different topics and things, and it's really focused on transformation. So,
We help to set some people free, including ourselves.
amen. Well, again, thank you for joining us here on our live stream. And until next time, take care and take care of each other. Bridget?
Bye bye.